Welcome to the Health Talks podcast. Today, we're joined by our co-hosts, Mr. David Jones and Ms. Jessica Brown. Our today's podcast topic is the human reproductive system.
All right, let's dive into a topic that I think is pretty universally fascinating, the human reproductive system. If you're listening to this, I'm guessing you're interested in the topic, and we're going to take a pretty deep dive today. We've got a really comprehensive guide to work from, so we'll be covering everything from the basic anatomy all the way to some of the fascinating processes involved.
It's a really amazing system, and what's so fascinating is how much it ties into just our general health and well-being. A lot of times we think of reproduction as like a separate function, but it really is incredibly connected to just everything else that's going on in our bodies.
It really is. It's not just about, the birds and the bees. It's about understanding how our bodies work at a really fundamental level. So let's kind of start with that overview. We've got the male and female reproductive systems, each with their own kind of set of organs and functions, but ultimately, they work together for that same purpose, the creation of new life.
And that purpose requires just this incredible level of coordination. Both systems are responsible for producing and transporting gametes, the sperm and the egg, which carry the genetic material that's necessary for reproduction. But it's not just about producing those cells, it's about creating the right environment for them to thrive, to mature, and ultimately to meet to form a new individual.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of get into the specifics then, starting with the male reproductive system. Our guide starts with the basics, the anatomy, and, we've got the penis, of course, but then there's the scrotum, which houses the testes. And this is where things start to get interesting. The scrotum is like a built-in climate control system for the testes, keeping those sperm at just the right temperature for development.
Right, exactly. Sperm are very sensitive to temperature changes, and the scrotum's ability to kind of adjust its position, moving closer to or further from the body, helps to maintain that slightly cooler temperature that's needed for healthy sperm production. And this temperature regulation is crucial for sperm survival. Think about it, this delicate dance of maintaining the ideal temperature has been happening for millions of years to ensure the continuation of our species.
Wow, that's a really cool way to think about it. It really makes you appreciate just the kind of evolutionary brilliance of the human body. So we've got the scrotum, but what about the internal organs that are involved in sperm production and delivery?
Well, we've got the testes, which are really the powerhouses of sperm production. And inside the testes are these tiny coiled tubes called seminiferous tubules, where all the magic happens.
Right.
This is where spermatogenesis takes place. It's this complex process that transforms germ cells into mature sperm ready to embark on their journey.
And our guide was mentioning that it takes about 2 months for a single sperm to actually be produced. That's a pretty lengthy process. Imagine the dedication. It makes you think about how, lifestyle choices could impact sperm health over that kind of extended period.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And it really does highlight the importance of our overall health and well-being for reproductive health. But let's not forget about the journey that those sperm have to take once they're produced.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not just about creating the sperm, it's about getting them where they need to go. So once the sperm are produced in the testes, they then move to the epididymis, which is kind of like a storage and maturation facility. And then from there, they travel through the vas deferens, which you can kind of think of as like the highway system for sperm delivery.
And along the way, they get a boost from a few other key players: the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral glands. These glands contribute fluids that nourish and protect the sperm and give them the energy and the support that they need for their journey.
It's like they're packing their lunches for their big trip. But what actually triggers their release?
That's where ejaculation comes in. It's a complex process, but it involves a coordinated effort of muscles and nerves culminating in the forceful expulsion of semen, which contains those precious sperm, through the urethra.
All right, so we've covered the kind of male side of things, from sperm production to delivery. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the female reproductive system, which I think is equally complex and fascinating.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is this kind of contrast between the continuous production of sperm in males and the finite number of eggs that females are born with. It's such a fundamental difference that shapes the entire reproductive process for females.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive in. Let's start with the female reproductive system, starting with the anatomy. So externally, we have the vulva, which includes the labia majora, labia minora, and the clitoris.
And these structures play a crucial role in sexual arousal and pleasure, but they also serve as kind of a protective barrier for the more delicate internal organs.
Right. And speaking of those internal organs, things get even more fascinating inside. We've got the vagina, which acts as the entryway for sperm during intercourse. And then there's the uterus, which is like the, I guess you could say, nurturing chamber, where a potential embryo can implant and grow.
And we can't forget the cervix, which acts as a gatekeeper between the vagina and the uterus. It plays this crucial role in protecting the uterus from infection and also helps to control the flow of menstrual blood and sperm.
It's like a highly secure checkpoint. So the sperm enters through the vagina, passes through the cervix, and then reaches the uterus. But where does the egg come in?
Ah, that's where the fallopian tubes come into play. They extend from the uterus and kind of reach out towards the ovaries, which are really the powerhouses of the female reproductive system. The ovaries are where those precious eggs are stored and released during ovulation.
So the fallopian tubes are like the meeting point for the sperm and the egg.
Mhm.
And if everything goes according to plan, that's where fertilization happens, right?
Exactly. It's a remarkable journey for both the sperm and the egg. The sperm have to navigate this challenging environment, while the egg, once released, has this limited time window for fertilization.
It really highlights the importance of timing in this whole process.
Absolutely. And that timing is largely dictated by the menstrual cycle, which is a fascinating and often misunderstood aspect of the female reproductive system.
Right, the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Our guide mentions that it's this cyclical process that prepares the uterus for a potential pregnancy every single month. But I feel like with all the different phases and hormonal changes involved, it can be a little bit confusing.
It is a complex process, but understanding the basics can really demystify it. The menstrual cycle is essentially a series of hormonal fluctuations that control the maturation and release of an egg from the ovary and prepare the uterine lining for a potential pregnancy.
Okay, so let's break it down. Our guide mentions 4 key phases. We've got the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, ovulation, and the luteal phase.
Exactly. The menstrual phase is what most people are familiar with. It's the shedding of the uterine lining if pregnancy doesn't occur. But that shedding is really just the beginning of a new cycle.
Okay, so after that menstrual phase then, what happens next?
Well, that brings us to the follicular phase. During this phase, the pituitary gland in the brain releases follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH. FSH stimulates the growth of several follicles in the ovary, each containing an immature egg. And as these follicles grow, they start producing estrogen, which causes the uterine lining to thicken in preparation for a potential pregnancy.
So it's kind of like setting the stage. But what about ovulation? When does that happen?
Ovulation typically occurs around the midpoint of the cycle, so usually around day 14 of a 28-day cycle. As the follicles continue to grow, they produce more and more estrogen, and when estrogen levels reach a certain threshold, it triggers a surge in luteinizing hormone, or LH, from the pituitary gland.
Oh, so it's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
Estrogen triggers LH, and what does LH do?
LH is the ovulation trigger. It causes the dominant follicle, the one that has matured the most, to rupture and release its egg into the fallopian tube. This is the moment of ovulation, that brief window of opportunity for fertilization.
So the egg is released from the ovary, travels into the fallopian tube where it might encounter sperm. Wow, that's incredible. But what happens after ovulation?
That's where the luteal phase comes in. After ovulation, the ruptured follicle transforms into a structure called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum produces progesterone, which continues to thicken the uterine lining and prepares it for implantation if a fertilized egg arrives.
So it's like this nurturing environment just waiting to welcome a potential embryo. What happens if fertilization doesn't occur?
If fertilization doesn't happen, the corpus luteum eventually breaks down, causing progesterone levels to drop. And this drop in progesterone is what triggers the shedding of the uterine lining, marking the beginning of a new menstrual cycle.
It's really like this carefully choreographed dance of hormones and cellular events, all geared towards this possibility of creating new life.
Exactly, and each phase of the cycle plays such a crucial role in this intricate dance.
We've covered a lot of ground so far, from the basic anatomy of the male and female reproductive systems to these really fascinating processes of sperm production, ovulation, and the menstrual cycle. What stands out to you as the most remarkable aspect of what we've kind of explored so far?
I mean, it's hard to choose just one. The level of coordination and complexity involved in these processes is just mind-boggling. But I think what really fascinates me is the interplay of hormones and how they really orchestrate this entire symphony of events.
It's like this delicate balance, isn't it? And
Yeah.
any kind of disruption to that balance can have some pretty significant consequences.
That's right. Hormones are incredibly powerful, and even small fluctuations can have a big impact on our overall health and well-being.
I'm really curious to learn more about that. I think the role of hormones and how they influence everything from puberty to menopause is really fascinating. But for now, I think we're going to wrap up this part of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the human reproductive system. Before we left off, we were talking about the menstrual cycle and all of the kind of hormonal and cellular events that kind of set the stage for the possibility of pregnancy. So now let's get into the miracle of fertilization itself, like the moment when sperm and egg actually meet and create that blueprint for a new human being.
Yeah, it's a remarkable event. It all begins with that crucial encounter in the fallopian tube. Millions of sperm embarking on this journey, each one carrying the potential to create life, but only one, if any, will succeed in fertilizing that egg.
Right, our guide was describing it as kind of this race against time. The sperm having to navigate a really challenging environment and the egg having this limited lifespan. So what are the factors that determine which sperm, if any, will actually reach the egg first?
Well, it's not just about speed. The female reproductive tract is a complex landscape, and the sperm, they have to overcome a number of obstacles. Some get lost along the way, some just aren't strong enough to make the journey. But the ones that do succeed often have certain characteristics that give them an advantage, maybe like a strong tail for swimming, or the ability to penetrate the egg's outer layer.
So it's kind of a combination of luck and resilience, I guess. But once a sperm does reach the egg, what happens next?
That moment of fertilization is truly remarkable. The sperm penetrates the egg's outer layer, and their genetic material fuses together to form a single cell called a zygote. And this tiny cell, it's barely visible to the naked eye, contains all the genetic information that's needed to create a new human being.
It's mind-blowing to think about, everything, our hair color, eye color, height, maybe even some of our personality traits. All of that's encoded in that single cell. So what happens to the zygote after fertilization? It doesn't just stay in the fallopian tube, does it?
No, it embarks on this incredible journey. The zygote starts to divide really rapidly as it travels down the fallopian tube towards the uterus. And this journey takes about, 3 to 5 days. And during that time, the zygote transforms from a single cell into this cluster of cells called a blastocyst.
So like this tiny ball of cells on a mission, what happens when the blastocyst reaches the uterus?
This is where things get even more fascinating. The blastocyst arrives in the uterus and starts to burrow into that thickened uterine lining, and this process is called implantation. And this is a crucial step because it allows that developing embryo to access nutrients and oxygen from the mother's bloodstream.
It's like finding that perfect, cozy spot to settle in and start growing. And from this point on, we're officially talking about pregnancy, right?
Exactly. Once implantation occurs, this whole cascade of hormonal changes takes place. The corpus luteum, which we talked about earlier, continues to produce progesterone, maintaining that uterine lining and supporting that developing embryo.
And I imagine the mother's body is starting to undergo a lot of changes too.
Absolutely. Pregnancy is this transformative experience, both physically and emotionally. The mother's body adapts in these remarkable ways to accommodate that growing fetus. Hormones like estrogen and progesterone surge, leading to a whole range of changes from breast enlargement and, sometimes nausea, to increased blood volume and a shift in the center of gravity.
Right. Our guide was saying pregnancy lasts for about 9 months. But what's actually happening during that time? It's not just about getting bigger, right?
No, it's this extraordinary period of growth and development. That single-celled zygote undergoes this incredible transformation, developing into a complex multicellular organism with all of its organs and systems in place.
So let's break down those 9 months then. What are some of the key milestones that happen during each trimester?
Well, the first trimester is all about laying the foundation. The major organs start to develop, and the embryo, which is now called a fetus, begins to take shape. By the end of the first trimester, the fetus is about 3 inches long, and it has most of its vital organs in place, including a beating heart.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's hard to believe so much is happening in just the first 3 months. What about the second trimester?
The second trimester is often considered to be a more comfortable period for the mother. Morning sickness usually subsides, and energy levels tend to increase. The fetus continues to grow really rapidly, and its features become more defined. By the end of the second trimester, the fetus is about 12 inches long, and it can even open its eyes.
Wait, so the baby can actually see at this stage?
Yeah.
That's incredible. What about the third trimester? I imagine things are starting to get a little more cramped in there as the baby continues to grow.
Indeed. The third trimester is all about final preparations for birth. The fetus gains a significant amount of weight, and its lungs mature, getting ready to breathe on their own. And the mother's body is also undergoing changes, preparing for labor and delivery.
So it's a real joint effort, with both the mother and the baby getting ready for the big day. So what actually triggers the process of childbirth?
Childbirth is a complex process, but it's initiated by hormonal signals that cause the uterus to start contracting. And these contractions gradually become stronger and more frequent, helping to push the baby out through the birth canal.
So it's all about teamwork, right? The hormones trigger the contractions, the uterus does the heavy lifting, and then the baby makes its grand entrance into the world. It really is a miraculous process.
Absolutely. From a single cell to a fully formed human being, it's really a testament to the just extraordinary capabilities of the human reproductive system.
We've covered this incredible journey from fertilization to childbirth, but I want to circle back to the role of hormones throughout this whole process. They really are like the master conductors orchestrating every step of the way.
You're absolutely right. We already talked about how hormones like FSH and LH trigger ovulation and how progesterone prepares that uterine lining for implantation, but their role extends far beyond that.
So what other hormonal changes are happening during pregnancy?
Well, for example, the placenta, which develops during pregnancy, produces a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. And this is the hormone that pregnancy tests detect.
Ah, so that's the famous HCG. But what does it actually do?
HCG signals the corpus luteum to keep producing progesterone, which is essential for maintaining the pregnancy, especially in those early stages. And as the placenta matures, it actually takes over progesterone production, ensuring the continued support of the developing fetus.
It's amazing how the body just adapts and creates these intricate feedback loops to ensure the success of a pregnancy.
It really is. And it's not just about those physical changes either. Hormones also play a role in the emotional and psychological changes that women experience during pregnancy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, pregnancy is such a significant life event. It's bound to have an impact on, a woman's mood and well-being.
Exactly. The hormonal fluctuations can contribute to everything from mood swings and just increased sensitivity to even a heightened sense of connection with the developing baby.
Right? It's a reminder that the reproductive system isn't just about biology. It's about the whole person, their physical, emotional, and mental well-being.
Precisely. And, while pregnancy is often portrayed as this joyful and blissful time, it's important to acknowledge that it can be challenging, too.
Oh, for sure. What are some of those challenges that women might face during pregnancy?
Well, besides the physical discomforts, like nausea, back pain, and fatigue, there can be emotional challenges like anxiety, stress, and even depression. And, hormonal changes can definitely play a role in these emotional fluctuations, but there are also social and environmental factors that can contribute to the challenges of pregnancy.
Right. So it's important for women to have that strong support system during pregnancy. Partners, family, friends, healthcare providers. People to kind of help them navigate both the joys and the challenges of this experience.
Absolutely. Support is crucial for both the physical and emotional well-being of the mother and that developing baby.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from that kind of cellular level of fertilization to the really profound changes that occur during pregnancy. What stands out to you as like the most remarkable aspect of what we've explored so far?
It's hard to choose just one thing, but I think what's truly awe-inspiring is just the sheer power of the human body to create and nurture life.
Yeah.
From that intricate dance of hormones to those remarkable adaptations that occur during pregnancy. It's a real testament to the evolutionary brilliance of our species.
I totally agree. It's a story of biology, resilience, and just the perpetuation of life itself. But our journey through the human reproductive system isn't over yet. We'll be back to explore some of the challenges that can arise, from common disorders to the importance of maintaining reproductive health throughout our lives. Welcome back to our deep dive into the human reproductive system. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? We've explored fertilization, pregnancy, the influence of hormones, really celebrating what our bodies can do.
Yeah, it's been amazing. But like any complex system, sometimes things don't go as planned. So let's shift gears a little and talk about some of the challenges that can come up, and how we can all stay on top of our reproductive health.
That's a great point. Our guide does mention a bunch of common disorders that affect both men and women. Let's start with some of the issues that can impact men's reproductive health.
Okay, well, a really common one is erectile dysfunction, or ED. Basically, it's the inability to achieve or maintain an erection. And it can be caused by a lot of different things: stress, anxiety, Health conditions like diabetes or heart disease, sometimes even certain medications can have an effect.
So it sounds like it can be physical, but also psychological, right?
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance of nerves, blood vessels, hormones, and of course the psychological factors too. And if anything throws that balance off, it can lead to ED.
What about other male reproductive disorders? Our guide mentions prostatitis and testicular cancer.
Right. Prostatitis is an inflammation of the prostate gland. It can cause pain, problems with urination, just general discomfort. Sometimes it's caused by bacteria, but a lot of times we don't really know what causes it. Testicular cancer is less common, but it's a serious one. It affects the testicles, and if it's not caught early, it can spread to other parts of the body.
So it sounds like regular checkups and just paying attention to any changes in your body are super important for men's reproductive health. What can guys do to be proactive, really
These
stay on top of
challenges.
things?
Well, a healthy lifestyle is key, right? Eating right, regular exercise, finding ways to manage stress, and definitely avoiding smoking and not overdoing it with alcohol. And doing regular self-exams, checking the testicles for any lumps or anything unusual. And of course, talking to your doctor about any concerns. Never be afraid to bring stuff up.
All great advice. Let's turn our attention to female reproductive disorders. Our guide mentions PCOS and endometriosis as two pretty common conditions.
Yeah, so PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, is a hormonal disorder that affects the ovaries. It can cause irregular periods, acne, sometimes excess hair growth, and it can make it harder to get pregnant. The exact cause is still a bit of a mystery, but insulin resistance and genetics seem to play a role. Endometriosis is a condition where the tissue that's supposed to line the uterus, it actually grows outside the uterus, and that can cause a lot of pain, irregular bleeding, and sometimes even infertility.
Those sound incredibly difficult to deal with.
Yeah,
What are the treatments like for women who have PCOS or endometriosis?
it really depends on the person and how severe their condition is. For PCOS, lifestyle changes can help, diet, exercise, things like that. And there are medications that can regulate hormones, reduce pain, and even improve fertility. For endometriosis, treatment often focuses on managing pain using hormonal therapy. And in some cases, surgery might be needed to remove the endometrial tissue.
Our guide also talks about cervical cancer. I know that's a big concern for a lot of women.
It is. Cervical cancer affects the cervix, the lower part of the uterus. It's often caused by HPV, the human papillomavirus, which is a sexually transmitted infection. The good news is that because of regular pap smears, which can detect any precancerous changes in the cervix, the rates of cervical cancer have gone down a lot.
So regular screenings are key, and of course, safe sex practices as well. What else can women do to be proactive about their reproductive health?
Well, it's a lot of the same things we talked about for men. Maintaining a healthy weight, staying active, eating a nutritious diet, managing stress. All of that contributes to overall well-being, and that includes reproductive health. And of course, having open communication with your doctor about any concerns or changes you notice in your body.
All really important reminders. We've talked about some specific disorders, but what about STIs, sexually transmitted infections? Those are a concern for everyone, right?
Yes, STIs are a big public health concern. They can affect anyone who's sexually active. Some of the common ones are chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and HIV. The good news is that a lot of STIs can be prevented with safe sex practices, like using condoms. And regular testing is so important for early detection and treatment so you can avoid potential complications.
Yeah, being informed about STIs, practicing safe sex, and getting tested, those are really key steps in protecting yourself and your partners. Where can people find good information about STIs and sexual health resources?
Oh, there are a lot of reliable sources out there. Your healthcare provider, sexual health clinics, organizations like Planned Parenthood, online resources, the CDC website, the Centers for Disease Control. They have a ton of great information.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. We've gone from the basic anatomy all the way to fertilization, pregnancy, the role of hormones, and the importance of maintaining our reproductive health.
It's really amazing when you think about it. The human body, the way it creates life, it's an incredibly complex and powerful system.
It really is. Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Thinking about all we've learned, what part of human reproduction do you find the most fascinating? Is it that a single cell can become a human being? Or maybe the way hormones control everything?
What resonates with you? And how does what you've learned today help you make decisions about your own reproductive health and well-being? Keep exploring, keep learning. There's so much to discover about our incredible bodies.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the human reproductive system. We hope you've come away with a deeper understanding of your own body and the amazing processes that make life possible. Until next time, stay curious.